Every night for 30 years, Johnny Carson walked through a curtain and became the most trusted man in America. The smile arrived first, then the wave, then that easy, unshakable confidence that made 60 million people feel like everything was going to be fine. He was warmth itself. A national campfire. The man you ended your day with. The voice that tucked the country in. But behind that curtain, in the silence before the band struck up and the audience roared, Johnny Carson stood completely alone in ways nobody dared to discuss, not even in whispers. When Jeff Dunham references Johnny Carson in his comedy, when fans search for Johnny Carson political jokes that shaped late-night television, when people wonder what Dorothy Stratton discussed on Johnny Carson's stage before tragedy struck, they are searching for something deeper than nostalgia. They are searching for the man behind the performance. And what they find is a contradiction so complete it borders on unbearable. The most beloved entertainer in American history was a stranger to intimacy. The man who made the world laugh had not spoken to his own mother in years. Not because of distance. Because he chose silence over the alternative. And he had been choosing silence his entire life. There is an irony in Johnny Carson's story that hurts too much to be coincidence. The child who grew up emotionally abandoned by a mother who withheld warmth like a rationed resource, who learned that love was conditional and rarely delivered. The teenager who discovered that making strangers laugh was the only reliable way to feel something real, to feel the hollow space where affirmation was supposed to live. The icon who built the most celebrated talk show in television history on the architecture of charm, wit, and the illusion of intimacy, influencing everyone from Steve Martin to the way modern hosts like Jimmy Kimmel approach their craft. All of that, so that life would arrive decades later and reveal that the man who connected with everyone had never truly connected with anyone at all. How does a boy from the flatlands of Nebraska become the undisputed king of late night? The man who would interview everyone from George Burns to Charlton Heston, from Tony Randall to Oliver Reed. What really happened behind that desk? Behind those monologues that shaped Johnny Carson on politics and made his political jokes legendary? And what happens when the very gift that saves you, the performance, the armor, the perfectly timed laugh, becomes the wall that destroys every real thing you ever tried to build? To understand all of that, we need to go back to the beginning, to Corning, Iowa, to the autumn of 1925, and to a boy who learned, in the cruelest way possible, that love was not something freely given, but something you had to earn. Every single day, with no guarantee it would ever arrive. John William Carson was born on October 23, 1925, in Corning, Iowa, a town so small and flat that the horizon seemed like a taunt, a reminder of everything that existed beyond the reach of ordinary people. His father, Homer Lloyd Carson, worked for the local power company, a steady, quiet man doing steady, quiet work in a world that rewarded neither ambition nor complaint. His mother, Ruth Hook Carson, was a different kind of presence entirely. She kept the house, raised the children, and maintained an emotional temperature in the family home that hovered somewhere between cool and freezing. Johnny had an older sister, Catherine, and a younger brother, Richard. They were, by all appearances, a functioning Midwestern family. But appearances in small towns are precisely the thing families labor hardest to maintain. There was no luxury in the Carson household, no connections to anyone who mattered, no road pointing toward anything except more of the same flat horizon. But there was something the house could not contain and the town could not diminish. There was a child who felt the world so intensely it frightened him, a sensitivity that would later make him the ideal vessel for the emotional needs of an entire nation. Ruth Carson was not a cruel mother in any dramatic storybook sense. She was something quieter and in many ways more damaging. She was withholding, emotionally unavailable in that particular way that leaves no bruises, produces no evidence, and yet shapes a child's interior landscape as completely as any trauma. Johnny would reach for warmth and find nothing there. Not coldness, exactly. Absence. The terrible neutrality of a mother who simply did not reflect her child back to himself with any tenderness or recognition. The consequence was a boy who stopped reaching outward and turned entirely inward, who became watchful where other children were open, who studied people with an intensity that had nothing to do with curiosity and everything to do with survival. He needed to understand what made people laugh, what made them lower their guard, what made them, just for a moment, offer the kind of uncomplicated approval his mother never would. This was not talent yet. This was hunger. This was a child constructing a survival mechanism that would eventually reshape American entertainment. In school, Johnny was not invisible. He was too smart for invisibility. But he was guarded in that particular way that classmates sense without being able to name, and so the friendships were surface level, pleasant but thin. He was liked, rarely known. Teachers remarked on his intelligence. Yearbooks recorded his existence. But nobody ever described knowing him, truly knowing him, the way you know another person when they have allowed you inside. Years later, when asked about his childhood, he would confess with a steadiness that was somehow more devastating than tears would have been, "My mother was never outwardly affectionate. I don't know what her problem was. I never knew. I never got close to her." A confession delivered flatly, like a man describing weather or traffic patterns. Which may have been the saddest part of all, the acceptance in his voice. The utter lack of expectation that things could have been different. At 13, something shifted. Johnny Carson discovered a magic kit, a cheap, cardboard, boxed collection of tricks sold through a mail-order catalog. And here, in the least glamorous origin story imaginable, something real began. He performed for neighbors. He performed for church groups. He called himself the Great Carsoni, a name stitched together from ambition and borrowed grandeur, and he stood in front of strangers and made them look at him with something his mother's face had never offered. He made them delight in him. He made them need to know what came next. For the first time in his life, Johnny Carson was not waiting for love. He was conjuring it. The magic tricks led to radio, radio led to television. And television, that hungry, voracious medium that consumed authenticity and spat back performance, became the place where Johnny Carson finally found his home. Not because he was naturally gifted at entertaining, though he was, but because no other arena demanded so completely that you disappear into a character, into a persona, into the perfect construction of someone worth watching. In 1954, at 28 years old, Johnny Carson arrived in Los Angeles with barely $300 and the kind of desperation that comes from knowing you have already failed at everything else. He had tried college at the University of Nebraska. He had served in World War II as a communications officer. He had attempted a career in magic, performing on local stages while the world moved on to bigger entertainment. Each failure was a small death, a confirmation that whatever he was, it was not enough. Los Angeles in the 1950s was not kind to dreamers. It was a city that ground them down slowly with the cold indifference of a place that had already seen too many young people arrive with hope and leave with empty hands and broken spirits. He worked as a writer. He worked as a radio announcer. He drove a taxi through streets that never slept, counting coins to make it to the end of the month. He cleaned apartments in buildings where actual celebrities lived, watching them through windows like a man looking into a world he could never enter. The rejections came in waves. Casting directors looked at his face and saw nothing remarkable. Producers listened to his auditions and heard competence without magic. "You're not what we're looking for," they said. And meant it. The phrase became so familiar it stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling like truth. But Johnny Carson carried something that no rejection could touch. He carried the certainty that if he was not on a stage performing, making strangers delight in his presence, then there was no point to any of it. This was not ambition in the conventional sense. This was survival. This was a man who had learned that existence itself was contingent on performance, and he would do whatever it took to keep performing. In 1955, he finally got a break. A local television show called Carson Skeller on a Los Angeles station. 5 days a week, no budget, no real audience, just Johnny Carson and the camera and the absolute certainty that this was his last chance. He made it magnificent. He brought in Steve Martin before Steve Martin was Steve Martin, before the world knew his name. He created bits that were so perfectly constructed, so precisely timed, that people began to notice. Not millions, but enough. Enough that other doors began to open. By the early 1960s, Johnny Carson had become a fixture on television. He hosted a daytime game show. He appeared on late-night programs. He was becoming known, becoming visible, becoming the thing he had always needed to be. But the cost was already accumulating, and nobody was measuring it. His first marriage to Jody Morrill had produced a son, Christopher. But Johnny's availability to his family was precisely inverse to his availability to the camera. When he was home, he was distant, distracted, already mentally preparing for the next performance. When he was away, he was completely present, entirely alive, fully himself. Which meant he was never fully present with the people who needed him most. Then, in 1962, Jack Paar announced he was stepping down as host of The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson auditioned. 6 minutes on camera, and something extraordinary happened. The executives saw not just talent, but inevitability. They saw the future of late-night television. They hired him to replace the most beloved host in the show's history. Johnny Carson was 36 years old. He had finally arrived. He hosted The Tonight Show for 30 years. 30 years of 5 nights a week. Thousands of episodes. Millions of guests. From Steve Martin's early appearances where Johnny recognized genius before anyone else, to George Burns sitting in that chair with the wisdom of decades, to Tony Randall delivering perfectly calibrated performances, to Robert Blake discussing his dark secrets, to the infamous moment when Dorothy Stratton appeared on Johnny Carson's stage just months before her murder. The show became the most powerful platform in American entertainment. Johnny's monologues shaped how America thought about politics. His Johnny Carson political jokes became the way the nation processed current events. He interviewed presidents and poets, celebrities and criminals, and made everyone feel like they were having a conversation with a friend. But the friendship was always one way. Always performance. Always the careful architecture of seeming available while remaining completely guarded. His second marriage to Joanne Copacabana lasted 9 years before collapsing under the weight of his infidelities and his emotional absence. His third marriage to Joanne Copeland produced 2 more sons but followed the identical pattern. Johnny was present in the home like a man visiting, never quite settling, always aware of the next performance, the next show, the next opportunity to make strangers feel like he belonged to them. The political jokes kept coming. Johnny Carson on politics became must-see entertainment. When he discussed Charlton Heston, when he referenced Oliver Reed's notorious behavior, when he sparred with guests like Lara Flynn Boyle, America was watching. 60 million people every night. The most trusted voice in the country. And nobody, not even the people closest to him, really knew him at all. By the 1980s, cracks were appearing. His ratings remained strong, but the world was changing. Cable television was fragmenting the audience. His material sometimes felt dated. He began drinking more heavily. His marriages continued to crumble. The thing that had saved him as a child, the performance, the ability to make strangers love him, began to feel like a prison. He was trapped inside his own persona. When he looked in the mirror, he could not find the person behind the face. The face had become the only thing that existed. Years later, he would admit, with the kind of brutal honesty that comes when a man knows his life is nearly over, "I have no close friends. I have people who work for me. I have people who are grateful to me. But I have never had someone I could simply be with, without performing, without calculating, without wondering if they were staying because they liked me or because they liked what I gave them. On May 22, 1992, Johnny Carson stepped away from the Tonight Show for the last time. He was 66 years old. He had been on television for almost 40 years. He had shaped American culture in ways that would take decades to fully understand. But he was exhausted. And he was finally, mercifully, done.